So with that, I'd like to welcome Rich to the program. Thanks, Rich, for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk about school board issues.
Yes, that's right. Well, and for those folks out there who watch the school board meetings, of course, you are probably a familiar face to them because you do, of course, go to the school board meetings on a fairly regular basis. At least I know I've seen you on the film footage. And, you know, so you actually are one of those folks where it's not just like suddenly an idea that came to you, oh yeah, I think I'll run for school board. You actually have a great interest in it and a commitment to it as well.
Yeah, I've been following the district since just before they decided where they were going to build the new North High School. So it's been 15 years or so.
Yeah, that's right.
I did run last time, and I was ahead for a little while. I faded off. But this time I'm going to do better.
That's right. Well, I think it's always a challenge, too, when, you know, when you're trying to be a nonpartisan voice, and that you want to just represent citizens in the community rather than necessarily either special interests or political parties.
Yeah, it is supposed to be a nonpartisan position, but the DFL really supports the people who are on the board now. And that was kind of frustrating because they have a lot of money behind them. They're able to email everybody in the district right before the election. You know, the union we've got 1,100 employees, and they all get an email who to vote for, and it's kind of a disadvantage to be an outsider.
Mm-hmm. Now, for our viewers who maybe don't know about you, why don't you share a little bit of your background information with our viewers so that they have a handle on, you know, your background, your experience that you bring to the table, and then we'll kind of jump from there to a lot of the key issues that you want to focus on.
Okay. Well, I spent a number of years in purchasing and some years in sales, and when I was in purchasing I worked for a company called Zytec, which did kind of like the twins in the 80s. They went from worst to first. They were a terrible manufacturing company, and we brought in some new people, and it took us 8 years, but we got to win the National Quality Award, the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, which says that we were the best electronics assembler in the entire United States.
Wow.
It took 8 years, and our school district's off to a really good start. They're doing the same thing that we did back in the 80s. They're starting it. Everything is data driven, and I spent the day at Richardson Elementary earlier this week with the principal for a couple hours going through exactly how they do it, and they are really doing a fine job at the elementary school level.
Well, and flesh out a little bit more for our viewers what that means to be data driven.
You do something, you measure it, you evaluate it, and you do it again. You know, you just keep cycling. You have feedback loop after feedback loop. You know, and in our education, I was watching they were working in small groups, and they would teach it, and they would let the kids give them some feedback. They would evaluate how the kids fed back. You know, did they learn it? Did they not learn it? If they didn't learn it, they'd try it again in a slightly different manner, get a little more feedback from the kid, and it would just go round and round and round, and it really, really looked good.
Now, I would imagine that incorporates a variety of teaching techniques, from whether or not that's memorization to hands-on learning?
Well, we were in a kindergarten class.
Ah, okay.
And they had the old trays from the lunchroom, and they would have the numbers across the top on little sheets of paper on a little bunch of blocks. And they would say, for example, the number 5, and they would pull down the number 5 and then count out 5 blocks and put it next to it so that they demonstrated that they understood what 5 really meant as a number and as something that they could count out.
Right, so I can see where that helps to you know, actually help them so that they can have that practical knowledge, you know, later on too. And I think back to my own boys when they were younger. A lot of times they would maybe ask me a question about something, and I'd say, well, what about? And try to show them through an example. And of course they hated that. They would just say, oh, Mom, just give me the answer. And I say, no. You have to be able to know more than just the answer. You have to understand how you arrived at that answer so you can kind of think it out.
Well,
think it through.
What was really interesting is because as they were doing this, you could tell which kids couldn't count, which kids didn't understand it, and you knew it immediately. So you knew which kids to praise, yes, you did a good job, and which kids you had to query a little further to get them to understand what they were trying, what you were trying to get them to do. And it really was fascinating, even at the kindergarten level, what they were doing.
Well, and I think this really kind of brings up a good point in that you have to start early in kindergarten, maybe even before preschool, but you have to start with those foundational blocks because, as you said, some kids have the foundational blocks in the very beginning because they've maybe had different experiences or opportunities, but in order for them all to be able to be productive students throughout their career, you need to start early, don't you?
They were starting very early, and they were doing stuff. I was in a 4th grade class, and they were doing perimeters and areas of circles, and it's like, we never did that in 4th grade. And we were in a 3rd grade class, and the principal, we just kind of bopped in for a second, and he was looking at, they were doing a test. So we were real quiet, and we walked out, but he did mention to the teacher, he says, didn't we do this a month later last year? So even though we're only a month into this, or a week later last year, we're only a month in, they're already a week ahead of where they were last year.
Wow.
So they're really going fast. It's it's kind of like a ball rolling downhill, and they've got the ball rolling now.
Now, of course, you're running for school board, and how many positions are there open or that are being that are up for election?
There's 3 seats that are open. 2 of the incumbents decided not to run, so there's only 1 incumbent running this year.
Okay.
So that opens it up, and there's 8 of us that are running for these positions. So
wow. So there wasn't any primary then?
no,
In
no
other
primary.
words. Okay. So basically, it's 8 of you filed. It's a free-for-all November 2nd.
It's a free-for-all.
And the 3 top vote getters are the elected board members.
Yep.
Okay. And so what's the total number? Because I have to confess, I'm in the area of Maplewood, that's in the Roseville School
We
District.
call you Mapleville.
Yeah, there you go. And so anyway, so in this District 622 is the North St. Paul Oakdale School District. And of course, that covers a great proportion of Maplewood, and obviously
all of North St. Paul and Oakdale, a little bit of Woodbury.
Okay.
Some
really? A little bit of...
a little bit of here and a little bit of there.
Wow, a little bit of Woodbury too. I didn't realize that. Wow, that's interesting. So about how many students are there in this district?
There's roughly 11,000 students.
Wow, okay. That's a lot of kids.
Well, we hear every year, oh, we're losing students, so we're losing revenue. And I'm looking at the statistics from our facility studies, and over 10 years, we only lost 400 students.
Well, that's not really too many.
That's not a lot.
Well, and I think that, of course, there's, I've heard that, when different school board members are talking, that they're talking about sort of the change of some of the demographics, too, of the students and how to, meet the needs of changing demographics, that there are more, communities of various immigrants that are in our country and in our school district, and also second generation, of course, as well. But it's just changing a little bit that way.
Well, one of the things that fascinated me at Richardson, they're about 65 or 45% white, and the minorities, black and Asian and Spanish-speaking, are about even. And the Spanish-speaking kids were showing up in the test as being a little bit behind in like reading skills. And so they were able to go out and create a early morning class just for those kids with busing and everything. And it doesn't cost the district anything, it's special funding from the feds. So those kids are getting an hour extra in the mornings so that they can catch up. Anything they can do to anybody who's lagging behind, it's unbelievable how much support those kids are getting.
Well, and that, of course, ultimately is very good for our community, because then we have students who are successful in their education careers from kindergarten up through senior high, and ultimately we're hoping that they go on to additional schooling and then stay here in our community and want to work here at within our community. So it's good. It's a good way of building our students' futures.
And again, it's all down to No Child Left Behind. The teachers really have bashed No Child Left Behind for the last 5 years, And yet, as I go through the school and ask about different programs, I said, does this have anything to do with No Child Left Behind or with QComp, which is the other funding source that we got from the state that after the first year, the teachers union backed out of. And then they recanted and we were able to get back in.
So what exactly is QComp? I don't really know what that is.
QComp is extra money that we have so that we can have teachers working together. If you got a teacher in a room and she's having a problem or he's having a problem, this is a time to get, say this is a 4th grade teacher, this is a time for him or her to get together with the other 4th grade teachers and say, you know, on this particular area, I'm just not getting through. And the other teachers may have had the same experience at some time in the past, like, oh, here's what we did. And it's an opportunity to bounce ideas off each other. It seems to be really working good.
It sounds like it's a collaborative type of program. Is that
it's
kind of on the right track?
It's a chance for them to work together. I mean, because historically you see, you know, the teacher shows up in the morning, puts out her plan, teaches the children, goes home, evaluates, you know, what they did during the day and fires up again. But there wasn't any opportunity for that teacher to learn from the other teachers.
I see.
And the QComp is really a big effort to get them to work together.
Now, you know, you're right about the fact that in the last 5 years, it seems like a lot of press has been out there about No Child Left Behind, about the negatives, or that somehow it's negative. And again, because my kids are mostly, well, one's 25 and the other one's 18, you know, I really personally haven't had that much experience and understanding about really what is it when they say it's these negative aspects about it. What is it that they're pointing to, and how is you know, in comparing that to the positive aspects that you see?
What the teachers don't like is, for 100 years they were not evaluated. You'd show up for a year, you'd make so much money. The second year you'd show up, you'd get more money. The third year you'd show up, you get more money. Or if you went and got extra credits in colleges, but there was no evaluation of their performance. Now if this is the routine that you've had for 100 years, and suddenly somebody comes in and says, oh, no. We want to look at your kids and see how much did they advance during the year they were with you. And fortunately, they've been able to. It's not the year, which, you know, we used to measure kids at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. Now they measure them minutes. I mean, they are literally, there's feedback going on all the time. And when you sit down with the principal, he is going into the class. This one principal spends 2 days out of the week. All he does is go and sit in back of classes, critiques the teachers. And then he sits down with them and say, you know, I really like this, I didn't like this, can you work a little bit on this? And then in their professional learning groups, they will work this out. You know, he said I was a little weak in this area, can you give me some suggestions? But he has written sheets, and it's just check, and he's, you know, just bing, 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 and once all these goals are accomplished, they fall off the sheet and new goals come up. And it's just, he's always getting a little better and a little better, and it's really fascinating.
Well, now I'm wondering, you know, this does sound like this could work out to be a very positive type of evaluation program or evaluation process. But are there any kind of checks and balances within it? So let's say, for instance, if the chemistry isn't quite right between, like, I don't know, you know, a principal and a particular teacher. I mean, are there some kind of checks and balances or ways that the teacher can ask for somebody else to kind of come in and also to co-evaluate it all?
Well, Troy Miller, who's the assistant superintendent, he also is keeping track on this. And when when he and I first started talking about data-driven management, he was saying that from his desk at the assistant superintendent, he can tell within 3 weeks if some kid has fallen off. You know, kids perform at a certain level, and for some, you know, something happens in their family or whatever, and all of a sudden they drop off. Even from his office, he's saying that within 3 weeks he will know what's going on.
Wow!
And so he will go down to the principal and the teacher
Wow, interesting, interesting. Now I understand that we do have a caller on the line. So caller, let's get your call out here. And thank you for calling in this evening.